Welcome to the Trick Play Podcast. The full podcast is available on both YouTube and anywhere you get your podcasts.
Hello and welcome back to the Trick Play Podcast. I'm Szyszkowski here with Caleb Peterson, and shortly we will be breaking down all the sports-related news, rumors, and drama that you will want to hear about. This week, we had a pretty loaded week with both the NHL and NBA Finals getting underway here, and a huge MLB betting scandal just about to get finishing up is kind of what I was trying to say there, with a lifetime ban being handed out for a man who only won 4.3% of his bets, which is very, very interesting. Make sure to check us out on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon, and anywhere else you get your podcasts, as we have new content coming out every single week on each and every one of those platforms. Just to quickly explain this, and I'm only going to explain it once for all the people who only watch the segments and are going to be very confused. I am in Mexico, which is why I have a bunch of palm trees and a big pool behind me. I don't just live here. I'm not in front of a green screen. I am actually backwards on a lawn chair with a table on my lap with my computer on it, which is about to die. And for all of those reasons, make sure to tune in for this week, as it's a very entertaining week and all that fun stuff. NHL Finals is the first thing on the docket. Make sure to stay tuned for that.
So, this is a big week in the sports world in general. We've kind of had a bit of a lull, but we're back into it with both the NBA Finals, which we'll talk about later, and what we're going to talk about now, the Stanley Cup Finals, with the matchup being finalized earlier this week when Edmonton beat Dallas in Game 6 at home. They are going to take on the Florida Panthers starting on Saturday. This is a really interesting matchup. Obviously, first time the Oilers have been to the Cup Finals since 2006. First time the Panthers have been to the Finals since last year. Obviously varying different levels of playoff experience. But I think it's a really exciting matchup. There's lots of different storylines here, lots of different ways we can take a conversation about this. But I'll just kind of throw it over to you, Simon, in terms of what do you think of this matchup, and is this finals matchup you're excited for?
I'm really excited for it. I think it's going to be really, really good. I mean, Edmonton has been underestimated pretty much the whole playoff run as a whole. So at the very least, it's been exciting to kind of watch their run, even as a fan of a rival team, just see how far they've gone. And Florida has kind of done what we all expected them to do. They definitely had the easiest route out of all the Eastern powerhouses there, and they pretty much, the big surprise was obviously them beating the Rangers, I think, more than anything. But obviously both the teams deserve to be here. I think that should go without saying. I think Edmonton's really, really shown that they belong at the upper echelon of those playoff teams, and they showed that. Beating Dallas in 6 was very, very impressive, and they especially with how high I was on Dallas going into that one. So between the two teams, it's going to be really good. There's a couple of Flames players on that Florida team, so that rivalry is still just waiting to be ignited again. I think it's going to be a super physical series. I like the matchup a lot. I think both teams have a lot of elite potential, and never in my life did I think I'd be saying that Stuart Skinner and Bobrovsky would be a hell of a goaltending matchup, but here we are in 2024 with that being the case. But yep. I'm really excited for it. This is going to be a really good Cup final. I think I'm more excited for this one than I was last year. At least in my opinion. Yeah. I think it's a very, very interesting matchup.
Yeah, and I think with a couple things. I think it's super exciting for us, just with it being close to home, obviously. It obviously creates a little bit of a moral dilemma, because do you cheer for the first Canadian team to win the Cup, or do you cheer against the Oilers as Flames fans? I never thought I'd admit this, but this is going to be heresy.
It is heresy.
I do think I'm cheering for the Oilers here. Hear me out. It's not because they're Canada's team, because I do think that's kind of garbage, because I think most Flames fans will be against me here. Just because my dad's an Oilers fan, and watching him is I'm not going to cheer against my dad at this point. But I do think that part of it is interesting. First chance for a Canadian team to win the Cup since 1993, when Montreal won, and it's really interesting that Edmonton has done it, because I feel like for like so many years they would be predicted to be the ones to go to the cup final. They'd be predicted to be the ones to win, because obviously you look at their roster and how could they not? And every single year they would fall short, because they would just come up against a better team and wouldn't be able to prevail, just because of a lot of the times how poor their depth was. They often fell to very good teams. You can't necessarily blame them. It's not like they got upset. They just got outplayed. You look against teams like the Avs, against teams like the Golden Knights. But for once, we're seeing that this is an Oilers team that can actually roll four lines. They actually are, like you said, getting good goaltending, getting hot in the playoffs. Yeah, it just seems like everything is kind of meshing together for them. It'll be really interesting to see whether they can actually take it that one step farther. I think for me, that series against Dallas was a bit of I think that was the threshold in terms of where this team had been before. That was the one time where they beat a team that had depth, that had playoff experience, that they weren't necessarily supposed to beat. So I think that was a huge reason why the Oilers have to be confident going into the finals.
Yeah, and I had Dallas over Edmonton, and I was fairly confident on it. In my head, even going into, I remember this whole playoff run, I had been saying that coming out of the West is either Dallas or Vegas. That first round series between them two decides the West. I was very confident in that, because whether it be Vancouver on the other side, whether it be Edmonton, whether it be Kings or Nashville, it was one of those teams was not going to upset Dallas or Vegas, and here we are now, right? Where Edmonton was actually able to beat the big powerhouse out of the West, and we're living in a world where all of a sudden Flames fans have to choose between Florida and fucking Edmonton. It's a hell of a world to live in. I don't know how to feel yet. I don't think I'm cheering for either, because I agree with you. I think it'd be I think we got to break the curse. We got to break the curse. I'm so sick of hearing Canadian team hasn't won since '93. I'm very sick of that, but having it be Edmonton hurts. But the only reason the only reason I can find that it doesn't hurt that bad is McDavid's going to win one eventually, right? There's no way unless he moves on somewhere else and goes and plays in America like every other Canadian star, chances are he's going to win one eventually in Edmonton over the next 20 years. Let's get it over with. He could have his one, no more. Never again, right?
And
I'd be okay with that.
Yeah, I think the McDavid part is another thing that's really interesting here, because obviously you look at a player of his caliber and you kind of would have expected him to have won one already.
Yeah.
It's the kind of thing where you look at it and you say, all of these superstars obviously playing in a different time. You look at Gretzky, you look at Lemieux, and you say the one knock against McDavid to be put in the same camp as them at this point in his career is the fact that he hasn't won a championship.
What year was Lemieux drafted again? He was 84, right? Took him about the
Lemieux, same. He played in the 90s.
Yeah,
but let's say
because Lemieux won in 91, was drafted in 84. That's 7 years. McDavid has been in the league for 8 now. How long was Gretzky? Gretzky would have been.
He was drafted in. Wasn't McDavid drafted in...
He was drafted in 2016.
15? Wasn't he drafted in 2015? I'm pretty sure he was drafted in 2015.
I think you're right. Yeah, I think you're right. So 2015...
So it's been 9 years for him.
Okay. Yeah, so it's been a while for him. And Gretzky was obviously pretty early on, but comparing anyone to Gretzky just isn't fair. Gretzky won, I think, came in the league in 80, 81... Won in 84, I think, was his first one, because he had some trouble getting by the Islanders and Flyers. But he definitely won. I don't remember if he won in 83, but he definitely won in 84. I think that was the first one. But anyway,
I think
my point was more the fact that I actually, whether he be like a year or two behind it, I actually feel like he's sort of right on schedule in a weird way. I wouldn't have expected him to win one by now. I think this is the teams he's had in the last little bit. I didn't expect as much as you can hype them up, and as much as you can hype them up as much as you want. But I've been saying for the last little while, like you pointed out, pretty much right off the jump, Depth was a huge issue for them. They never could find solid goaltending. They were switching goaltender almost every year. And, I mean, there was a ton of things you could nitpick on those teams, and it showed. They didn't really get anywhere. I think the farthest they got was the conference final when they lost to that would have been the Vegas year. So, yeah, when they lost to Vegas. And now they finally filled all those holes. As much as I hate Stuart Skinner as a goaltender, he's doing a good job, and he's doing exactly what they need him to do. And their depth looks good. Everything about that team is looking really, really solid. And I think you got a lot of reasons to be worried if you're Florida. I think if I heard about this series going into the playoffs, I would probably be going, Florida in 6, Florida in 5, something like that. I don't know. It started. I think I say we leave our predictions for who we think is going to win till the very end, just to keep things a little spoopy. But at least to me, I think it's definitely very interesting now. Where I don't know where I land on it. Did they just beat Dallas because they're hot? Are they going to cool down at some point here? And suddenly it's a completely different series against Florida. There's a lot of questions going into this one, which certainly makes it interesting. Like, what if McDavid can't get going? What if Draisaitl slows down? Like, there's so many things on the Edmonton side and they're taking on Florida, who are pretty much the model of consistency now. This is their second straight finals. They're due for one. They're due for one bad. And I don't know. It's an interesting matchup. It's as far as I'll go.
Yep. And in terms of, just to finish up talking about the Oilers, I think with this matchup, I think looking at the past series, I think there's one thing that kind of gives me confidence, and there's one thing that kind of scares me. And I think the one thing that gives me confidence is the fact that in their series against Dallas, the Oilers had their biggest strength essentially taken away for a lot of the series, and they were still able to win. And that's the power play, where Dallas didn't give up a lot of, they didn't take a lot of penalties, and Edmonton didn't convert on a lot of them. I don't quite have the stats for the last couple games they played, but the last time we talked about the Oilers, this might have even been, I don't know if this was the podcast that never got posted, but we were talking about them at one point, and I remember looking at the power play stats for the Oilers.
That was last week.
And we were, I think at game 4 by this point, and they hadn't scored a power play goal. Yeah, so if you're an avid trick play listener, you remember that. But I think that's impressive, just to say their power play wasn't clicking on all cylinders like it had been all playoffs, where we were talking about it as one of the better power plays we've ever seen, where we were talking about it as the reason they're going far in the playoffs. They had it taken away, and they were still able to win against probably the best team roster-wise in the Western Conference. That gives me a lot of confidence. The one thing that scares me is the consistency of Stuart Skinner. You look at his performance in Game 6 against Dallas, fantastic. McDavid came out and said, hey, he stole the game for us. Edmonton, I think, only had 10 shots in that entire game. They did not play well, except for a fantastic goal by McDavid and a good shot by Hyman. You look at a performance like that, you look at how he's played throughout the rest of the playoffs, and you just kind of have to hope the hot streak keeps going. Because it wasn't that long ago that we were talking about Calvin Pickard coming in and saving the Oilers from how terribly Stuart Skinner was playing. So I think those are the two things that kind of scare me. It's like, one of them, the Oilers have shown that they can kind of take a blow and keep going. And the other one, I think, the whole Stuart Skinner, Calvin Pickard thing almost ended their playoff run when Stuart Skinner was playing very poorly. I don't know. I think you have to hope that Skinner keeps playing to this level, or else I don't think they have much of a chance.
Yeah, if Skinner slows down, they're done. It's as simple as that. If Skinner stops playing at the style, if anything gets him stopped, it's over for Edmonton. If you have to rely on Pickard, it's done. We crossed that bridge earlier on in the playoffs. That would have been 2 or 3 weeks ago now, where we put out that video. And the funny thing is, by the time that had been released, I think Skinner was starting again, which was absolutely hilarious. But I mean, I agree with you on that one. I think that's the point you made right off the jump, I think, is really important about that Edmonton and Dallas series. They beat them at 5-on-5. That's the crazy thing. I would not have predicted that. I don't think anybody could have predicted that. I think the big storyline going into that series was Dallas has them 5-on-5. any day of the week. If they stay out of the box, it's over. Funnily enough, if they don't take penalties if Edmonton doesn't take penalties and Dallas doesn't take penalties, Dallas wins. Edmonton has the best power play. They have the best penalty kill. They win that way. They win 5-on-5. Edmonton, if they can force Dallas to take penalties, that's Edmonton's series. And the funny thing was, they couldn't do that. Dallas played clean, and they beat them anyway, which is an insanely impressive thing. They beat easily the deepest team in the West, other than maybe Vegas, who Dallas beat in the first round, and they just completely destroyed them. And I mean, it's got to be a scary thing if you're a Florida fan, if you're watching from that Florida side, as high as you have to be on that Florida team at this point, just based on what they were able to do to the Rangers and Bruins for that matter. I mean, it's an insane. This is going to be a fun series. I'm still scared for Edmonton a little bit. I'm still a little scared. This certainly is going to be the closest of the series I think we've seen out of the last couple Canadian teams that have gone to the finals. I mean, I think Montreal, that was a foregone conclusion. Them going against the Lightning. All of us in Canada were crossing our fingers, but we all knew. We all knew before it even got started that there wasn't a good chance. Montreal was beat up. They just weren't the same team that the Lightning were. Everybody knew going into that year the Lightning were the team to win, the team to beat. And even going back to 2011, I think that was the last one before then, in Bruins and Canucks. That one was very, very close, but I think the Bruins were really good that year. I don't know. I guess that one was probably the last close one.
I think it's probably the closest since 2011.
Yeah.
Because I mean that was a Game 7.
Yeah.
And I think, because I think even then, it doesn't sound like you're going back that far, but that's still like what, 13 years? I was in like first grade when that happened.
I remember riding the bus when that series was happening.
I do too. Yeah, no, nobody from Canada since. You had Montreal in 2021, and you had Vancouver in 2011, and then I think you have to go back. The last one before that, another Game 7, was the Oilers losing to Carolina. So, looking back at both of those, other than Montreal, that there was lots of heartbreakers in there for Canada. 3 lost Game 7s. I think we gotta hope that doesn't. If you're cheering
and
for
the
the
one
Oilers,
before
that doesn't happen again.
Edmonton was 0-4.
Yes, that was the other Game 7 I was talking about, and we don't talk about that one in Calgary.
We don't talk about that one. That one still hurts.
Yeah, it was in. But one last thing I want to say about the Oilers before, if we want to talk about the Panthers a little bit. Another thing that Florida has to be scared for, you mentioned it a little bit, in terms of the Oilers beating Dallas 5-on-5. I think they get a little bit of that strength back against the Panthers, in terms of getting on the power play. If you look at the most penalties taken, this is according to StatMuse, the most penalties taken this playoffs, the number one team, most penalties taken, the Florida Panthers. Dallas, so they've taken 69 penalties this playoffs. And just to compare that to how disciplined the Stars have been this playoffs, they only took 46 throughout their whole playoff.
Impressive.
So that's very impressive. The Oilers are definitely going to get a lot more chance, especially with how physical a lot of this Florida lineup is, starting with the 2 Flames in this lineup, and that's Tkachuk and Bennett.
Yeah, and that's going to be a huge factor too, because you know that there's a little bit of a chip on their shoulder too with their time in Calgary. There's a whole country, or no, there's a whole city on their shoulders right now, because the last thing in between Edmonton and a cup right now is Tkachuk and Bennett, and that's really fun. That's another reason I'm kind of cheering for Florida. I've met Bennett. I never got to meet Tkachuk, but still, he seems like a pretty cool dude, even with what he did to the whole city in Calgary. I don't know. I'm very excited to be able to watch them in the finals here. Again, obviously, they were in last year, but this one feels more real. I'll say that. I think last year Vegas was the team to beat the whole run for the most part. Everybody knew they were really, really good. And even going into that series, I think most people would have told you Vegas was the favorite. And I can certainly say I wasn't that surprised when Vegas came out on top. And now we're sitting on the other side where Florida's looking like a pretty big powerhouse with the teams they've beaten to get here. Just looking at the past history, their playoff success. Sorry if there's any background noise being picked up. I do have there's a family near me on a big swing. But yeah, I don't know. I like Florida a lot just overall as a team. And I mean, a big reason they're good is they're very physical. They're a very physical team. They have a lot of things that work in their favor in that way, and that's not necessarily a good matchup for them, I think, against Edmonton. Not to say that I don't think they could push Edmonton around a little bit, but if they go in the box too many times and you let McDavid and Draisaitl and Bouchard do what they do, it's going to get a little scary out there. And I don't know. I don't have Florida's penalty kill percentage in front of me, but off the top of my head, I'm going to assume it's not incredible. Or it's probably pretty good, but I've never heard anything about their penalty kill that makes me feel confident in a situation where they're taking 4 or 5, maybe not 3 or 4 a game. Let's say that.
Florida, just to interject quickly to give you that stat, Florida actually has the second best penalty kill in the playoffs.
Okay, well then there you go. Then I'm talking out of my ass, and that makes me feel a little bit better.
They take a lot, but they're good. Yeah.
Well, you have to be if you're taking a lot, you have to be, right? And I think that's going to be a big conversation in the locker room going into this one with Coach Paul Maurice. Is just like, if you guys are going to be taking penalties, you guys better get ready to go once things shit hits the fan and McDavid starts doing McDavid things. And I'm excited for this one though. It's going to be good. I think that power play is going to be huge for Edmonton though. I think that's got to be a big storyline. I said that going into the Dallas series as well, but you got to think that's super important in this one. I mean, you're not going to beat them otherwise. You beat Dallas 5-on-5, sure, but even going into the playoffs, I would have told you Florida's better than Dallas. I think there's a lot of teams on the eastern side that's better than a lot of other teams on the western side, and I think Florida beats Dallas fairly easily. And now that we're here in a situation, Edmonton versus Dallas, or Edmonton versus Florida, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be a good one.
Yeah, it definitely is. I mean, you talk about how this feeling more real, and I feel like for Florida, and I feel like that has a lot to do with how last year they were the underdogs, right? Like, they barely snuck into the playoffs. They had the upset against Boston and kind of rode that to the final. And even then, it was more of a Cinderella run that you think, okay, when is this going to run out? But that's not at all the case this year. This year, they came in as the favorites, right? In every series other than maybe the one against the Rangers, like, you think, oh yeah, they're going to win this series. They were, I believe they were first. Well, were they still first in the Atlantic? Yeah, they were. I believe they were still first in the Atlantic. I might have to double check that.
I think so.
But that's an incredibly tough division. When you're looking at some of the teams that are coming out of that division, you look at Boston, you look at Toronto, you look at Tampa, like, looking at all of those teams, it's one of the, I think, the hardest divisions in hockey. And to see them go from a team that's barely snuck into the playoffs to being the first team in that division, it shows that the kind of development they went in the playoffs last year stuck. I think a lot of that has to do with some of the players that have broken out for them. I think you have to look at Bobrovsky and net, first of all. He's played fantastic. It was looking like a bit of a poor contract for a while, but the last couple of years he's really stepped it up. And then I think Reinhart is the other one, where it's like he's been playing so much better this season than anything that he's shown in his past however many years in the league at this point.
Which is pretty impressive too, because he's no slouch. It's not like this career year has come out of nowhere. He's a very, very good player, and he's shown that in the past. But yeah, no, I agree with you. He's very much stepped it up, and that's huge for Florida. I mean, it's a big reason why they've been so good. You can list off the elite talent they have at this point: Kachuk, Barkov, Reinhart, Ekblad. The list goes on. Bobrovsky, right? Like, normally when you think about elite teams, they have like a lot of good depth, and they have a lot of, like, they maybe have 1 or 2 stars. Florida's got it in more when it comes to that, right? Like, even on the other side with Edmonton, when I think stars, I think McDavid, Draisaitl, list stops. Bouchard's getting there, but I don't think he's there yet. And
Nugent Hopkins?
I'd put Bouchard before I put Nugent Hopkins, but
All right.
yeah, I don't think Nugent Hopkins there yet. He's the honorable mention because out of all the players in the finals this year, he might be the one who's he has a cup coming up for him at some point here.
Yeah.
Especially, I mean, he's been in Edmonton for when was he drafted? 2011,
More than 10
2012?
years.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
been around for a while. And
Yep.
got to give him props for that. At the very least. He definitely deserves something.
Sticking it out.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, 2011.
Yeah, well, there you go. But
Yeah.
even just like you look at the elite talent on both sides, it is. I don't know. I think Florida's definitely the favorite. I haven't taken the time to look at any betting odds because I don't care. But I think if I would be very surprised to see if those said anything different, and if they do, I'd be hammering Florida because, I mean, it feels like this is their year. It feels like this is their year, just in every way. They've beaten all of the really hard teams they have to beat, and now they're just facing Edmonton. And it's a weird thing to say that they're just facing Edmonton, right? But just look at like Rangers. The Rangers, it felt like this was their year as well. I mean, Hurricanes felt like it was their year, right? Boston, always at the red in the playoffs. It's just, like Florida's beaten everybody, and it's really starting to show.
Yep. And I don't know. I do think to a certain point you feel like this is Edmonton's year too. Just in terms of what I talked about of them finally getting past the threshold of beating a team with actual depth and playoff experience. Um, so I do think they are a pretty formidable challenge. You're right that Florida is the favorite. I'm looking at FanDuel right now, and they have Florida as the favorite, not by very much,
Okay.
but they do have them as a slight favorite. I will kind of like we can get to our predictions here in a second. I'll kind of just ask you. I'll ask you just a super broad question. If you could put this matchup down to one aspect, one thing to say, like if this goes right for this team, they're gonna win. Like if Edmonton gets good goaltending, they're gonna win. If Kachuk plays well, if whatever, what is that for you to say? If this team does this, then that's deciding the Stanley Cup.
I think in a lot of ways it's Florida's cup to win. I think if things go the way that I think they might, Florida will win. But I think if Edmonton gets their power play going and has the same power play we saw against the Kings saw against Vancouver, if we see that power play, Stuart Skinner continues to play hot, continues to play the way he's been playing. If both of those things happen, I don't think it's one thing. I think both of those things need to happen. I think that Edmonton definitely has a shot at it. I still think that the series would go probably 6 or 7, but I think that would definitely make things a lot better for Edmonton. I think if they don't get their power play going, or if they don't get good goaltending from Skinner, it's going to be a very, very tough series for them. I don't think they'd be able to beat Florida 5-on-5 the same way that they beat Dallas. I think you got to get on the power play a bit more, and you got to score on the power play when you get those shots. I also think McDavid has to be going the whole series. There's been times in the playoffs he's been very, very good. Don't get me wrong, but there's a few games here and there where he's stayed off the scoreboard. None of that. I don't want to see a single pointless game out of McDavid in this finals. I think he's got to win Finals MVP. I think because there's been points where Draisaitl has been outplaying him. No more of that. That's got to stop here. And you got to think that that's the same thing in his head as well. This is, we talked about it at the beginning. This is McDavid's cup. This is the thing that makes him a legend. He can't be getting outplayed. He needs to be the guy. And I think at the end of the day, if all of those things happen, Edmonton will win the cup. But it needs to start with the power play and it needs to start with Skinner. Both of those things need to happen. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I'd agree with you. I think those are both like. I think if Edmonton wins the cup, it is going to be because of those two things. It's going to be because of the power play, and it's going to be because of Skinner. If I want to just kind of answer that question with something from Florida's side, I think the biggest thing for them is which player, is it Kachuk? Is it Sam Bennett? Is it, I don't know, Ekblad, somebody who's going to step up and make McDavid have those pointless nights you're talking about? Because for every McDavid pointless night where it doesn't look like he's playing great, I think you got to have great defense, whether it's B from your forwards or B from players like Ekblad or Brandon Montour or whoever it may be. I think that's going to be a key for Florida. I think if you can slow down McDavid, then I think the rest of this kind of falls into place. Because even though Edmonton's depth is a lot better, everything still starts and ends with him. Because you're right, the focus is going to be on him. All the pressure is going to be on him. So if he starts faltering, like, even though depth guys like Adam Henrique or Matthias Janmark, like, even though those guys have been playing a lot better than a lot of the Oilers' depth in the past has, you're not going to get, like, Matthias Janmark to Connor Brown to win the Stanley Cup. You're going to get Connor McDavid.
But wouldn't that be a hell of a call?
Connor
Matthias Ekholm across to Connor Brown, and the Oilers have won the cup. That would be such a legendary moment. Honestly, if Connor Brown wins the cup winner, I will die happy. That would be hilarious.
Does that mean all of our takes for how stupid the Connor Brown signing were finally proven wrong?
I would eat that, though. I would be perfectly okay with that. Connor Brown did nothing. All playoffs, all regular season, nothing. Nada. People were talking about him being a first-line mate for McDavid. Never happened. Then all of a sudden, he comes in and he's the hero. McDavid's done jack shit. Connor Brown, 20-point finals. 5 points a game. It's going to happen. Full sweep for the Oilers. It's my prediction.
It's gonna happen. That's the key. It's the Connor Brown breakout game. breakout finals.
That's not the key. That's not the key. That's just what's gonna happen.
It's just what's gonna happen.
It's not the key. It's just destiny.
Bet all your life savings on it. Betting with trick play again.
Oh, sweet Jesus. I don't know if I ever told that story on the podcast. I don't know if. Now that I think about it, I don't even know if I've got a cousin named Jordan who he tuned into a couple episodes around Christmas, and I haven't talked to him much since then, so I have no clue if he still listens. But if you do, Jordan, I am so sorry, but the Trick Play podcast will not be becoming a betting podcast. That was the one thing he said. He was like, "You guys should talk about betting." It's like, no, it's not gonna happen. Sadly, neither me nor Caleb know anything about betting, and I would not listen to either of our advice.
You could put money on, like, the takes we randomly spew out, but I don't think that would go very well for you.
No, it probably wouldn't. I mean, I have thought before, maybe what we should do for, like, the NFL season or something like that, if we end up doing, like, a weekly preview, we should call each game, and then we could keep, like, a scoreboard in the corner. I think that'd be cool. Yeah. I've seen people do that before. That might be fun. Cool. That might be fun, but I don't think we'd do more than that. I think that is about as far as I'd go for, like, mainly because I'd want the score.
That's not even betting.
And exactly. Unless we bet something at the end of the year, like jumping in the ocean. But
yeah, I'm still one down.
You're still one down.
That's as far as true play betting is concerned.
Your debt will continue to grow. But I think if we did that, I'd want the scoreboard there just to show, like, wow, yes, you can bet on all of the picks Simon made this week, but he is also 14 for 246. So maybe play it, maybe count your pennies a little bit more before you do that.
No.
Do you want to give
Speaking of trick
big
play
picks?
betting.
Yeah, do you want to make the big picks?
If you were a betting man, who would you pick to win the Stanley Cup final?
Am I going first, or are you going first?
You can go first. I'm intrigued.
Well, I think I've been pretty clear on mine for the most part. Florida is the big favorite. It feels like their year as much as it feels like it's McDavid's year as well. Like, there's a lot of things leaning towards him potentially. This is like his moment. This is the thing that really, like, this is the moment he elevates himself into the Gretzky, Lemieux, Bobby Orr. This is his legendary run right here. Nah, I don't think so. I think we're going to see a bit more of a... I think McDavid will win one in the next 5 years, if you want another prediction out of me? Yes. I do think the Oilers will win at least sometime in the next 5 years. I don't think this is their year. I don't think Florida goes to the finals twice and loses both times. I just don't see it. Like, that would be crazy. I think I honestly think that the outrage, if Florida went to the Cup twice and lost both times, would be insane. It would be insane. I honestly, off the top of my head, I don't even know if I can name. What do you say, sorry?
From who? Who's going to be outraged? The
Florida
fans?
Yeah, Florida. Of course they're going to be outraged. Are you kidding?
Like, I don't know. I think there would be a whole lot more outrage if Edmonton loses. I don't care that they haven't been there.
That'll be the conversation too, which is exactly why it'll. There's going to be outrage on either side. I'm not saying that, but I think
that's how losing in the finals generally.
Yeah,
works.
Exactly. But like, no matter what, they'll be outraged. But I at least think losing twice back to back in the finals. No, Florida needs one here, and I think this is theirs. I think McDavid still has a lot of time. I think assuming him and Draisaitl stay together for a little bit longer, they'll win one eventually. I just don't think this is it. I think that they've, as good as they looked against Dallas, they've shown at points. They've shown weakness at points, whether it be goaltending, whether it even be the offense slowing down, not being able to get on the power play. Like, there's been things that have stopped them from being able to succeed, and they're just, I don't know, man. I haven't seen the same thing on Florida's side. So, if to give my take, I'm gonna say Florida. I think it's in 7. I think it goes to Game 7. I think we're gonna get a very, very good series. It's gonna be very close. We're going to see a lot of good things out of McDavid, but I think when the final bell rings, it'll be Mr. Matthew Tkachuk lifting the cup. That is my prediction.
Yeah.
Take it to the house.
I am going to take it to the house. Take it.
Take
your
it to
life
the
savings
casino.
on it.
Yeah, take it to the bank.
I'm gonna go the opposite direction with this one.
Okay.
I do think I agree with a lot of what you said. But I do think that series against Dallas changed my mind a lot about the Oilers in terms of answering a lot of my questions. Can Stuart Skinner sustain good play for the length of an entire round? Yes, he can. Like, we saw that out of him. We saw that rebound. And despite all of the pressure that was put on him after being benched in the playoffs, he was able to come back and perform. So I think that puts a lot of faith in me to be able to say he will be able to form at least to a level where he can get them, where he won't lose them, the finals. I think that's a big thing. And I think the thing we already talked about with the Oilers being able to beat the Stars on 5-on-5. I know Florida's a better 5-on-5 team, but I don't think you should downplay Dallas. Dallas was my Stanley Cup pick, and they were also a fantastic 5-on-5 team. So playoff tested. One of the reasons I took them to win the Stanley Cup at the start of the year was just saying, like, they've been so close so many times. Like, you think the playoff experience they have would take them over teams like Edmonton, and this Dallas team beat the last 2 Stanley Cup champions, right, in Vegas and Colorado. Like, I think that was honestly, like, even though you could say Florida maybe is a better team on paper, I think that's just as impressive of a win, if not more so, than it would be to beat Florida in my eyes, just because of how good I think that Dallas team is. So I think that answered a lot of my questions about them, and I do think the Oilers have a huge, even though obviously Florida has home ice advantage for the series, having a better record, I think Edmonton's home ice advantage is going to be so much more pronounced. I don't see them losing at home. I think they're going to get a lot more opportunities in the power play than they did in Dallas. I have a feeling about this. And you can say that the Panthers have been to the final last year. They've got the playoff experience, but I really like the quote from Chris Knobloch this week, where he came out and said, basically, playoff experience doesn't mean shit. Look at the Buffalo Bills, talking about them losing 4 times in a row in the 90s. And he's right. I don't think it's going to mean anything that Florida's been here before. I think Edmonton is ready, and I'm going to pick them to win in 6.
Ooh, 6. Whoa. Okay. So there's both of our picks. We're both on opposite sides of that, which means that we get a very nice graphic coming out probably the same time as this episode comes out. Maybe I'll put something up there. Simon versus Caleb, the finals matchup of whatever. You get what I mean. We'll throw something together. Those are our picks Florida in 7, Edmonton in 6. We'll see what ends up happening. I do think no matter what way it goes, I think it's 7. That is the one thing I'll disagree with you on. I think Edmonton can win it, but I do think they'd win it in 7. I don't think they would be able to. I don't. 4 games to 2
I feel like a lot of
against
matchups
Florida.
would say it would go 7, but
yeah, I know,
I don't
that's
know,
true.
because I don't. I see Edmonton wins all 3 of their home games, and they steal 1 in Florida. There's your 4-2.
Oh yeah. Okay. I see where you're coming from with that. Okay. I see you. Yeah, no, it'll be good. It'll be a good series. I'm excited for it. NBA Finals coming up next year. Up next, we have got ourselves the NBA Finals between the Dallas Mavericks and the Boston Celtics, which I don't quite remember when that series ended up being decided, but I think the last team to make it was Dallas. And this whole thing is going to be very, very interesting, I think, to watch. It's very similar to the NHL Finals that we just talked about here. There's a lot of different types of matchups. Kyrie Irving being on both sides at different points. There was a lot of animosity towards his exit in Boston. There's a lot of things going on there. Now, obviously, he's playing with Luka Doncic on Dallas, and we've just seen that entire thing go very well for him. I think earlier today being Thursday, he came out and said that this is the best team he's ever played for, or something along those lines. Best basketball he's played, like most fun he's had, which obviously being on a lot of teams with LeBron James and that Cleveland run, or few runs that they had, very, very big credit to the Mavericks. And yeah, I think it's going to be a pretty good series. I don't know about you, Caleb, but obviously Boston has been pretty good for the last little while. They've made it this far a few times now. Same thing with the Mavericks. Haven't been here before. They haven't quite made the finals. I don't even know if they've made the conference off the top of my head, but nonetheless,
well, they won. They've won the finals before. They've been there twice previously. They won in 2011 against
that's what you're talking about.
LeBron. And then
yeah, I thought you were talking about in the like Luka's won one before. I was like, wait, it's late enough here.
No.
That it's late enough here that I was like, wait, really? Did I just forget that? No, Luka.
No, I thought you were talking about Dallas in general.
No. I know that.
Twice.
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought you were talking about Luka.
Yeah,
I was like, not only once. How do you forget two?
Luka has not been
two
here.
Championship runs.
Luka has not been here. No, God no.
That's more what I meant. I more meant this Mavericks team hasn't been here before. This is new to them. And it's been long enough. It's now been, because you're right, 2011, I believe, with that Dirk team. It's been long enough that nobody is really still around other than Mark Cuban for Dallas. So, as a whole, other than, isn't Jason Kidd? Yeah, Jason Kidd, right? Still coach? Right?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, he was on that Dallas team. So there you go.
Yeah.
Bit of a return for him. Yeah, there you go. I almost forgot about that.
True.
A lot of storylines going on on both sides. A little bit of a different role. That's very true. I think it's very interesting because Luka Doncic has sort of been, he has kind of fallen into that spot of like, he's been top 3 in the NBA for the last little bit. Top 3 best players, pretty much uncontested, but he hasn't won an MVP. He hasn't won a championship. He just doesn't. He doesn't have a lot on his trophy shelf, and it's not talked about that much. Like, he just hasn't won any of the big awards yet, and it's very odd to me because of how good he has been at points that he's somehow just not won it yet. And MVP, it'll happen eventually. He's played at such a high level that it's going to happen at some point in the next little bit. And I think it just highlights the amount of talent in the NBA. I mean, look at Jokic. Jokic is so good that he's stealing them from everybody else. So I don't think the MVPs are anything that you can really hold too heavily against Luka, but championship is the other thing. Like, this is by far the best team he's played with. It's not like he's been given the most talent in the world, but it's going to be pretty exciting. I think this is a big legacy defining year for Luka. I think this is his big chance to really start to work on his resume a little bit and add to his trophy shelf. And I think he's going to try and take advantage of it. I think it's going to be very interesting to watch him here. I think, because I remember seeing the stat come out earlier today, again Thursday, that in the NBA playoffs he leads right now every single play. maybe I hope it's every single player, not just the Mavs, but he leads every single player in points, assists, rebounds. There was another stat in there, but I'm not confident enough to say what it was, but I think it was 4 different categories he's leading the NBA in, which is insane, by the way. That is pretty much unprecedented. The only player I can possibly imagine doing it would have been LeBron. And the fact that Luka's kind of in that same category, it's just nuts. It's just nuts, man.
It is. And I mean, I do think you're right in terms of, I think we're at the point now where everybody knows how great he is. Like, I don't think that's the part that you're questioning. I do think it's a bit more of a legacy conversation, right? It's a similar conversation we had with McDavid, right? Where we all know that he's the best player in the league. Obviously not necessarily the same for Luka, but we know he's one of the best, like you said, top 3, top 5 players in the league. But you do kind of, I feel like, need something like this just to really cement your place. I think of this kind of and compare it to the Giannis and the Bucks title run, however many years ago that was, just a few years ago, where obviously we all knew how good Giannis was, but that Bucks team had struggled at that point to make a name for themselves in the playoffs. And once I believe it was the Suns they beat. Once they beat the Suns, and Giannis just, like, you see Giannis carry that team. I think that did a lot to cement how good a player he was and kind of cement his place in NBA history. I think Luka can do the same, where he's already viewed as one of the superstars. I think you just need this extra piece to go that one step farther and say, okay, he's crawling towards becoming a legend. He's gonna need a lot of help from his supporting cast, though, because obviously he's got Kyrie, but other than that, I think the Celtics roster, like you said, they've been good for so long. And I think this is, like, just looking at the Celtics depth chart, like, they're stacked from top to bottom. Because you've got Porzingis coming back from injury. Obviously, you've got Jason Tatum, hasn't been playing as well as he can this playoffs, but obviously still a very good player. Obviously got Jaylen Brown, Drew Holiday, who's someone I a lot of the time forget is on this team, but so good defensively. Like, I look at that whole team and I think, yeah, like, Luka is probably the best player playing in this matchup, but I don't know, like, that's a tough team to go up against.
Yeah, no, without a doubt, I think I agree with you right there. I think Boston overall has the best team. I think that's without a question as well. I think there's a lot of the elite talent goes the other direction. I think that backcourt that Luka and Kyrie has is just, like, there's been conversations about where that stands all time as one of the best backcourts ever, and it should be a conversation people are having because of how good they are playing together. I think that there's definitely, past that, the Mavericks just don't have as much. Not to say that they don't deserve to be here or even are necessarily how good they are actually going to do against Boston, but as for, like, that championship depth you're looking for, I feel like that's definitely more on Boston's side, without a doubt. I don't think that's necessarily a question. It's just how we're going to have to see how Jaylen Brown stands up against Luka, how Kyrie stands up against, I guess the next person in line would be Jason Tatum. It's going to be very, very interesting to watch. And just as a whole with both of these teams here, either way you look at it, there's some big storylines. Kyrie beating Boston to win a championships, or the other way around, Kyrie leaving Boston and then Boston winning a championship against Kyrie. No matter way you look at it, it's pretty storybook right there with that whole matchup going on. And I mean, I'm very excited to see how it all goes. I think this is going to be... I haven't been watching as much NBA in recent years. I have sort of abandoned the sport a little bit. But I think this is going to be a finals matchup that I'll definitely tune in for a few games of, if I have time. But mainly just because, God, it's just storybook. Like, Boston potentially getting the chance to add to their number of championships. Obviously, we have their kind of competition with the Lakers for who can get more rings. That has been going on for decades at this point. It adds to what they've already had. And on the other side, Dallas is this is the defining moment for Luka. This is potentially the last. He's still got a couple more good years in him, but last big elite hurrah here for Kyrie, I think. And I think all of those things combined are going to make for a really good series here.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, I do think it's storybook for all of the reasons you said, but also just, I think as someone who is kind of like you said you've kind of grown away from basketball. I think I'm trying to grow more into it, trying to watch more, because I think one of the big things that turned me away from basketball in kind of when I was growing up, why I went more to the NHL, was just the lack of parity in the NBA, where I got so tired of seeing and being able to predict Warriors Cavs in the final for like 4 straight years or whatever it was. So to see new matchups with new teams who haven't been there in a while, obviously, like we said, Dallas hasn't been there since 2011. Boston hasn't been there. They were there in 2022, but it does still feel like they're a team that's kind of more so one step short. Not necessarily like in the finals consistently. So I do think it's a really exciting matchup in that way. I also think it's exciting on the Dallas side, because they're a 5 seed when you look at this, right? Like they've gone on a pretty incredible run, beating, the Clippers are no slouch in the first round, beating Kawhi and that team, then going up and beating OKC after all the hype they've had, knocking out the 1 seed, and then going and beating the Timberwolves with Anthony Edwards, and after they just knocked off the Nuggets, defending champions, in 7. Like, I think that being able to look through all of this and say, like, the Mavericks, a 5 seed, have legitimately, like, made each series a great series. And I could say, and even though you kind of look at it on paper and say they might be outmatched against Boston, to be able to say, like, I do think this isn't just another year where you kind of know what's going to happen. Like, it's not just like Golden State's going to win again. That kind of thing. I do really appreciate the fact that I can go into this finals and say, like, I think this is going to be close. Like, I think this is going to be a good series with a lot of with great level of competition. Like, that's what I'm looking forward to more than anything as a neutral fan.
Yep, and I agree with you on pretty much all of those points. I think it's going to be very, very good, based on matchups we just haven't seen. I mean, Boston and Dallas are just. I keep saying it, but it's a very storybook series. There's a lot of things here that no matter who ends up winning, it's just kind of perfect. Like, it's just it's going to fit in perfectly to the story of the league we've seen in the last little bit. And I think that's a very good point you made there with just the parity of the league and how that's sort of led to a lot more interesting matchups. It's not Cavs and Warriors anymore. And at least for more casual fans, it's definitely leading to more people tuning in more, for sure. And I could definitely see that argument for it as well. And it's a big reason why I'm going to be probably tuning into a few of these games. It also helps that there's a lot of very recognizable names on either side, right? A lot of people who very much deserve to be in the spot they're in. So it's going to be very, very good. I don't know if we're at the point where we want to give our predictions for the series, but I think I'll let you go first since I took the NHL. I think.
Yeah, so I think a couple things. I think that obviously, like you said, like that Luka Kyrie combo is formidable no matter what team you are. I think just I'll make my prediction here too, but I just want to add the one other point that I was going to bring up about Dallas. I think it's very impressive that they are where they are when you look at where they were at the end of last season, where they just kind of gave up on the season with like 2 games left. That's really interesting, and they had Kyrie on that team too.
Also, just to add to that as well, with where people were at with that Kyrie and Luka like matchup, people had thrown that away instantly. Like, with the way that things were going at the end of that season, people were like, these guys don't know how to play together. They're both trying to ball hog, and neither can do it. like it just wasn't working. And all of a sudden, things just clicked this year, especially in the playoffs. So, yeah, I'll let you continue taking it. Yeah. I wanted to add on to that, though, just where the conversation was.
Yeah. Like. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you did, because I think that also speaks to just, like, as sports fans in general, like, this isn't just a basketball thing, just about giving new pieces time to mesh. Because I believe Kyrie was a mid-season acquisition that year, so it makes sense that they're not going to be that they don't know how to play together yet. Giving them an off season and then a full season to make it work instead of just tearing it down immediately, I think that means a lot. I think especially in basketball, you see so many teams that have been constructed, and then you look at them and say, like, how many games did they end up playing together? It's like maybe you just needed to give them a little bit more of a shot. And I think that may not work all the time, but Dallas this year has been a testament to say, okay, this can work if you give these kind of experiments a little bit more time. Um, for all that I'm doing and talking of Dallas, though, because I do think they've been very impressive in the playoffs, like to beat the Timberwolves in 5, almost sweeping them, to beat the Thunder in 6, like, I think it's very impressive. But then you look at the other side of the bracket and look what the Celtics have done this playoffs. They've only lost 2 games, right? They swept the Pacers, lost 1 against the Celtics, lost 1 against the Heat. And I just look at that, and
lost
I look
1
at
against
the depth
the Celtics?
they have. I lost 1 against the Cavs. Sorry, last 1 against the Cavs.
Okay, that makes more sense. I wouldn't have normally pointed something like that out, but I was actually curious who they lost 1 against. Like, I personally wanted to know.
Because they beat the Heat and Cavs in 5, and then they beat the Pacers in a sweep. Yeah, no, I'm looking at the Celtics, and I'm just thinking, wow, they only lost 2 games all playoffs despite not having Porzingis for most of that run. And now they're getting him back and adding to what was already like such a dominant roster. We talked about in our Stanley Cup final preview to say, like, you were saying this kind of feels like Florida's a year where they've fallen short a couple times, and it feels like this is the time. This feels like that for Boston. I think Dallas will make it close, but I have Boston in 6.
Okay. You know what's funny? I was definitely more on Dallas's side, but I think you swayed me a little bit. I think a lot of the points you made there are very, very important. The fact that Boston's only lost 2 is insane. That is insane to me. Like, I think, though, just to make things interesting, I'll go on the other side. I'll paint a picture here. So far, Dallas has been the underdog in every single series they've been in. Almost every single. I think Clippers was basically a coin flip, but them going against who was it in the second round again? It was the Thunder.
OKC.
Yeah, yep. I think anybody would have told you OKC in that series. OKC has been so good this last season, and it was honestly weird to see Dallas beat them a little bit. And then we see them go against who was it again? The T-Wolves, and what they were able to do against the Nuggets. Then out of nowhere, the Mavericks were able to beat them. And with that, and not only that, but they beat them in 5. Like, both of those are just incredible feats of just being able to win despite everybody counting you out. And now we're in a situation where they're playing the Boston Celtics, who have only lost twice. Everybody's saying it's their year. I think Dallas does it again. I'm saying in this scenario, I'm going to say, or not, yes, no, I did say the right thing there. I'm going to say Dallas does it again. But this time I think it's going to be a little closer. I think it goes 7. I think Boston potentially wins the first game. I think they maybe win the second. And then we start to see Dallas step on the gas. And we see that, like, underdog. I think if we end up seeing a series like that, this one might end up going down in history as one of the more entertaining finals we've seen. And if we see something like that, if we see some finals heroics out of Luka, or even Kyrie for that matter, that would make for a pretty interesting situation, I think. But I think so. Your guess was Boston in 6. Mine was Dallas in 7. So either way, I think we're both sort of saying with this one, it's gonna be close. It's gonna be really good, and I'm very ready for it. I think there's a lot of conversation on either side with this whole thing. Make sure to let us know who you have as well, and why we're both stupid dumb heads for who we decided to take. Because at the end of the day, who knows what ends up happening? But it'll be interesting nonetheless. Because obviously we'd potentially see that Boston Celtics team, I believe, win their first chip, which Jason Tatum and Brown have both had coming their ways for God knows how long at this point. And even on the other side, like I pointed out, this is the chance for Luka to really, really work on his legacy a little bit more. And he's dying for it. That is a guy who likes to win, and I think it's been eating him up a little bit that he hasn't got there yet. And now this is his chance with the best team he's had around him, a co-star who really makes him look good, and I'm very excited.
Now, I don't know how long it's been, but we're back with an MLB segment. And because we don't do these a lot, that if we're doing an MLB segment, that it's got to be something pretty good. And it's pretty big news. It's something that, according to ESPN, hasn't happened in a century. And that is, if you haven't heard the news, I'm going to butcher this guy's name. Tucupita Marcano. He was a player for the San Diego Padres. And the reason he is in the news is because it was found out that he placed hundreds of bets on baseball, including bets on his own team when he was with the Pittsburgh Pirates. And because of that, the MLB reached out and said, we can't have you doing that. And the thing that hadn't happened in more than a century is they banned him for life. He is no longer allowed to play baseball in the MLB for as long as he lives. It was the first, here's what ESPN said, the first active major leaguer banned under the sports gambling provision since New York Giants outfielder Jimmy O'Connell in 1924. That is...
Well, sports betting
the
is
other
probably made it easier.
What's that?
Sports betting is probably made it a lot easier to find people to ban if I were to bet.
It's true. And we can get into that. I think the one last thing I want to say is, I think when the name that comes to mind a lot when you think about baseball and betting and people getting banned is Pete Rose. But that lifetime ban was while he was managing the team. So this is the first time in a century that it has happened to a player, a current
that makes
player.
Sense. Yeah. And
so
I meant online betting. I think I said sports betting, but you get the
idea.
Yeah.
I think in general. I think you look at how, not just in baseball, in every sport, you look at how widespread sports betting has become. I don't know how it is if we have viewers in the States, but you look at Sportsnet, every intermission of every hockey game, there's betting ads. You have cabbie shilling for betting.
Well, and I also want to say, this is kind of like a tangent a little bit, but I went there, so if it's not obvious, in case anybody might have not watched the intro, I'm in Mexico. That's why there's palm trees behind me. I don't just normally live in whatever weird place it probably looks like I live in. This is very odd for me. But anyway, I decided to go find the gym here because I didn't feel like gaining 15 pounds. I probably ended up gaining 10 anyway, but it doesn't matter. And I decided to go box. And they had TVs in the room they had the punching bag set up in. And on those screens, it was all in Spanish, so I had no idea what was actually happening. But on those screens, they just started showing the lines, the sporting lines, or the betting lines, and I was like, oh, can't even escape it here. It's clearly not something that's just happening here in Canada, or not there in Canada, I guess. But it's something that's clearly happening worldwide, and it's just the world we live in, I guess, where everywhere I look, I see sports betting, and it's just great.
Yeah. And I can't say that I know as much about how much the MLB has been pushing it, but I don't know. You see this in the NFL, where I look at some of the things and I'm like, I'm a young football player who's just been given a lot of money, and I see how much betting is promoted at a lot of these NFL channels. You probably do know the rules, and that, yes, it is still stupid to do it. It's still stupid to bet on games. It should be a no-brainer. But at the same time, I think there's a reason it's happening now. It's just because of how much more It's kind of being shoved in people's faces, and like the heel turn that's happened from it being this taboo thing, which I don't think that was the answer either, but to being like wholeheartedly like accepted and pushed on people. Like even as I'm reading this ESPN article, a big header right next to like all of the league logos is ESPN Bet, right? Like I do think I just think it's so interesting. Like you see all of these scandals start coming up. I wonder why. I wonder why with this timing.
You got to think there's some sort of like middle ground. Like it doesn't need to be pushed as much. Yeah. I'd be okay if they like brought it up occasionally. Like I think the way that we do it is kind of not to pump ourselves up at all or anything. It's not like we do anything that's like anything out there. That's not what I'm trying to say. I'm not trying to say what we do is anything near incredible, but like I think bringing it up as a talking point, like this team is clearly favorited, right? Like that's a good way to bring it up, right? But you don't need to be like, here's 7 lines that you should put your house on, and if you don't do it, you're a coward. Like we can leave all that we can leave all that behind. Like, just bring it up when it makes sense to. Like, bring it up in conversation. You don't have to shove it down our faces by throwing it, like, underneath the ESPN logo and throwing it here and throwing it there. Like, it's too much. It is way too much. I wonder, to a point, what even people who do sports bet and sports gamble have to say on that. Like, because I know me and you, we're both on the one side of the argument where I don't bet on sports. I don't think you bet on sports at all. Like it's just
no.
It's both for both of us. We're clearly on one side of the fence. I have no issue if they like occasionally throw it at me. It's not like every time I see a gambling line, I'm like, oh no, those. It's not like I care that much. I just don't. Excuse me. I don't think they need to be showing it every 10 seconds or even close to the amount that they're showing it now. And obviously the big reason that they're showing it as much as they are is sponsors, money, all of that fun stuff. Because a big sponsor now for Sportsnet is whatever gamble. I don't even remember what gambling site they're with, but whatever it is, like I'm sure they make a lot of money off that, which is exactly why it's probably not going to change. Realistically, we're talking to a wall. It's like everybody complains about it, but people have been complaining about it for 2 or 3 years at this point, right? Like that's not new. Like this is at this point. Yeah. At this point, this has been happening for a little bit here, which is again a reason I'm not that surprised, I guess, that I was seeing it even here in Mexico. Like at the end of the day, it's something that we should probably just learn to live with, and I have. I think at this point, I don't notice it as much as I did when it first started happening. But it's definitely a big part of it. Also, before I don't know when we want to bring up what this guy's winning percentage was. Betting on himself, it was like 4.3%. Which makes it so much funnier, because not only was he betting on himself, which just isn't smart. Like you shouldn't bet on yourself in any situation unless you know you're going to lose. If you're taking a dive, I guess that makes sense, but I don't think that was the case.
You pull a Jonte Porter.
Yeah, exactly.
Where you just bet that you're going to suck and then you get injured.
Right? But no, this guy seriously had the nerve to bet his entire life savings on himself and then lose his job. What an idiot. Holy smokes. How do you do that? Maybe he was just trying to not get caught. Like that's kind of what I wonder, where maybe he placed like a bunch of 99-cent bets and then placed like one $100,000 bet or something. I don't know if you actually have the numbers on that, right? But like maybe he ended up positive at the end of the day. But like, it's just crazy that ended up happening. Like, how do you only win 4.3% of the time? Are you betting like on like 1 in a million? Like,
yeah. So he bet. So this is directly from this ESPN article. It said he bet almost exclusively on the outcomes of games and lost. This is the point. That's fun. He lost all of his parlay bets involving the Pirates. So all of the times he bet on his own team, he lost. He didn't win a single one. So yes, 4.3% overall, but he didn't win a single one with the Pirates. And I mean, yes, absolutely to your point. What an idiot. I think is the right way to say it, because I do think it's important to bring up, like, I think we're kind of on the same mindset of this. Like, am like I don't love how proliferated the messaging around sports gambling has been in terms of just like it being pushed to us. But I want to like make sure that I say this. I am not against it whatsoever. I think it's great that it's been legalized, because I mean, you do what you want to do with your own money. I think it's more of an issue that I have with just like how much that the big heel turn, where it's like saying, oh no, we're going from it's so taboo to we're promoting it like every 5 seconds on every network. Um, so there's that point. I also think, even despite that, even despite how much is being promoted on like sports networks and stuff, um, yes, this guy is still such an idiot. There's still no excuse for this, even though I do think just how much is being promoted probably has a part to play in that. It's still so stupid. I think this is another interesting thing from the ESPN article that it points out, saying that posted in every single clubhouse, so he would have known this, states exactly what the rule is in terms of betting, which is betting on any baseball game that the player is not involved in, automatic 1 year suspension. Betting on any game that the player is involved in, which obviously this guy did, is a lifetime ban. Um, yeah, and that's pretty cut and dry. Like, the guy's an idiot. I don't know how you can't read that and just say, well, no shit. If I wasn't going, like, you shouldn't be betting on your own games anyways, and there's no way he doesn't know this if it's posted in.
I have a funny feeling he knew exactly what he was doing. It would be pretty.
Like,
I get your point. I get your point, but it's like I don't think he just accidentally went, oh, really? I can't bet on myself? Oh. No, he knew what he was doing. And that's the funny thing at the end of the day, right? Where it was like, you knew what you were doing, you messed up, and you made no money. It's like the one thing you were trying to possibly do with your whole thing there was like, no, completely out the window. Didn't do anything with it, which is why I almost feel like the conversation was like, were you trying to get caught? Like, what was the point of that? What was your end goal? You won 4.3% of the times, none of which on the Pirates. Were you just trying to test the rule? Like, even if you won nothing in all of your bets on the Pirates, am I still going to get banned? Well, yeah, of course you're still going to get banned. You still broke the rule. Even if I tried to kill people 26 times and I never actually did it, I'd still get charged for attempted murder. Like, it's not like I need to do it to get the thing, right? Like, it's, at the end of the day, no matter what, you're going to get something, which makes it so funny. Like, it's just insanely funny. Yeah. Like, we're saying all this stuff about, like, how it's been advertised and all that. I don't feel bad for him. Like, what he did was just stupid.
Oh, God, no.
What he did was just plain old stupid. Like, at the end of the day,
it was stupid.
Yeah, like, it's you, I don't even know. Like, how do you do that to yourself? Like, other than, like,
yeah.
You honestly just, like, completely ruined everything for yourself. You were going to make, even if you were on, like, the shittiest contract in the MLB, you're still making more money than almost any average person. Like, not even almost, pretty much any average person, and you're set. You're set pretty much for life, assuming you don't mess something up badly. I'm sure you'll get some sponsors like, no, I'm just gonna bet on myself, and we'll see what happens. Spin the wheel.
Yeah, yeah, and like you said, I think it makes it. Your point was that he probably knew what he was doing, and I agree with that, which makes it all the more stupid, right? Like, there's no way he didn't know that he's gonna get banned for this, and I just don't like. I don't know. In a lot of these segments where it's like there's kind of one opinion that I think we both like disagree with, or there's one side we both disagree with, I'll often try to play devil's advocate and try to see where people are coming from. But in this situation, I can't even fathom. Like, I can't even like start to form any sort of logic as to why you would do something like this. Like, I don't know. It doesn't make it. Even if you don't know this rule, it's just like, how do you assume you're not going to get in trouble for something like this? I don't know. I think it's so stupid.
I think, I personally think, like, I'm the type of person who, in most things that I do, I like to bet on myself, not in that way, but I like to bet on myself in my own head, right? Where like you put all your chips on one thing and you just give it your all and you see what happens, right? Like in a lot of, and the funny thing is I don't bet. I don't gamble at all, which is what makes that whole mindset just so insanely dumb. But like that is how I look at a lot of things. So even like when I ran competitively, you got like every race you go into, I'm winning. That's all that's happening. There is no other outcome here. I'm not prepared for if I lose. I'm going to win this race. And it's that type of thing. And if you had asked me before that race, would you put money on yourself to win? I would have said yes. And that mentality is the type of thing where like the only way I can imagine is I am going to put money on myself to hit a home run in this game. And if he was doing that, and it got 0 of them, absolutely none, holy shit. How are you betting on yourself at all?
It is a good point to say that he wasn't actually betting on himself in that way, because I don't know if it says it in this article, but I did read elsewhere. He was in. Oh, it does say here. He was injured. He had a season-ending knee injury, so he didn't actually play in any of the games that he bet on while he was a member of the Pirates. I don't know if that makes it worse or better.
Yeah, I think he just got bored. So like, if I have to watch all these damn games, I might as well put some money on.
Do you honestly think that's it? I don't think. I think that's probably the best explanation we've come up with so far.
I do know people who like actively. The main reason they bet on sports isn't to make money or isn't to like because they think they're going to end up on top. They're just like, I am going to sit here and watch this basketball game for 2 hours. I don't really like basketball that much. I don't know a lot about it. I don't know the players. But if I put $20 on this team to win, this gets a lot more interest. Now I'm following it. Now I'm like in it. Now I'm in it like I'm a fan, right? So, and that, I do get that. I get that. Like, that is the only situation I can imagine myself really betting on anything, because my logic will forever be, there's no way I'll ever make money. I think that I know, I will say, I think I know quite a bit about the UFC, for example. Like, I think going into a lot of fights, I am generally right on my picks. But generally right doesn't mean always right, and there's always upsets. So I think, I don't know. It's always very, very entertaining to watch all the people who are like, this pick will go through for sure. If you think that guy's going to win, you're an idiot. And then the other guy wins, and you see them like the next week, and they're just like hungover, hands like on their face. The whole world has fallen apart. They brought their own coffee from home because they didn't want to buy from Tim Hortons or Starbucks. Like, it's that type of day for them, and you're just like, all you can do is laugh. And it's I don't know. Yeah. Enjoy sports gambling however you want to. I'll never judge. But like, I guess
unless you're a member of the team. I think that's the one asterisk you have to put. Yes, enjoy sports gambling however you want. It's your money. You do whatever you want with it, unless you're part of the MLB or NHL or NFL. Just don't do that. If we want to wrap up the segment, I just will put this out to you. Do you think that a lifetime ban is justified? Like, if you're in this situation, you're Rob Manfred, you're deciding how long to suspend him for, lifetime is pretty strict.
Especially compared to like what people get for like DUIs and like hitting their
domestic
spouse.
Assault or,
like it's on that sense, it's pretty wild, like, to say the least, that's the case. Like, domestic abuse ends up getting 10 games while this guy got bored one lunch and decided to place 247 bets that he lost and lost his entire career. Like, I don't know, man. It's pretty harsh, but at the same time, you're a dumbass. I don't know if any team, I imagine, even if it wasn't a permanent ban and it was a year, do you really think he's back on the Pirates the next year? I don't think so. I think the Pirates cut him.
No.
I'm sure the MLB lets him cut them. And then I'm sure he's gone forever, into the wind, and we would have never heard his name again. And I think that'll be the case. I think no matter what, he's done in the MLB. Whether it be a year, whether it be 6 months, I think he's done. He's not a big name. I don't think there would have been a lot to really a lot of redeeming things that would have kept him around is kind of the point I'm trying to land on. He didn't have an interpreter to blame. He didn't have any of that stuff. Like, it just wasn't there for him. And at the end of the day, I don't know. I think he would have been done no matter what. So it feels like at that point you're just like, doesn't matter. Like, cool, lifetime ban's cool, but he would have been gone no matter what.
Yeah.
He's not Pete
I do
Rose,
think,
I guess is another way to say it. He's not Pete Rose, where people
it's
are
not,
like,
people aren't going to be upset about it.
it's not. Yeah, exactly. It's not like he's a legend. Like if Mike Trout did what he was doing, it'd be a very different conversation now, right? Because I wonder, the MLB is going to ban one of their biggest stars of the last like almost 15 years. That would be a pretty crazy thing. But no, this guy's not Mike Trout. He's not Shohei Ohtani. He doesn't have an interpreter. No one cares.
Yeah, and I think, it is interesting with like the Ohtani stuff. I mean, let's say there was no, obviously, like, I think it's that has sort of settled and the interpreter has pled guilty. So that's kind of all behind us at this point. But let's say it was actually Ohtani who was betting on games, and let's say the interpreter, I don't think ever bet on baseball. But let's say like Ohtani did bet on an MLB game. The rule's pretty black and white. If you bet on games that you are you're part of the organization, lifetime ban. I just wonder if they do the same for their star players or if they'd hold back. I think that conversation would get very interesting. Hopefully you don't get to that point. Hopefully star players would have people around them to be like, hey, don't do this, or they just wouldn't be that stupid. But yeah, I do think it's a big thing. I think you see this more in baseball than any other sport. You obviously have a big history with it, more than any other sport. I believe it was the 1919 World Series that most people believe was fixed, where the White Sox were paid to tank the series. But yeah, I think it's really interesting. I think there was a couple other gambling suspensions that were announced alongside this. Obviously nowhere near as bad, no other lifetime bans. But I just think it'll be interesting to see how this integration of sports gambling into the kind of modern cultural lexicon of talking about sports. I think it'll be really interesting to see how that influences how the MLB will carry out things, because this is just the starting point. And when we eventually see a big name, because at some point it'll happen, how are they going to handle that? I think that's the biggest question I take from this going forward. Because you're right, if this guy just got a 1-year suspension, nobody would have cared and he wouldn't have been able to sign anywhere. But it does set a very interesting precedent. Lifetime ban, it's a big deal, black or white. We'll see how this goes forward carrying into the future. Thank you everybody for watching. I'm going to say this as fast as I can so Simon's laptop doesn't die. Make sure to like, subscribe, all the things. Find us YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, all the places. Apple Podcasts, you can find us. Look up Trick Play Podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. Boom, done. Record time.
Done. Record time. I think we have time for shoutouts. We're still
into-
at 7%. We still have time for shoutouts.
Okay, sick. Because I have a good one that I just thought of in the middle of the podcast because it made me very mad in the middle of the podcast. My anti-shoutout goes to Apple's voice assistant, who shall not be named, or else she will activate and mute my mic, which happened multiple times in our Stanley Cup final our Stanley Cup final preview, because I was saying the word, I'm not going to say it. I don't know if you know what word I'm talking about, Simon.
The
Maybe
magic
you could
word,
say it, because I
Siri.
can't say it.
Although my phone might go off now.
So if we're talking about like who's going to win this blank, I can't say that anymore because the devil is going to pop up and say, like,
no,
I don't
think
understand
what you were
mean.
saying, you were trying to ask me a question. So you kept opening it with, and we had to record it like 3 separate times because your Siri kept going off, but you kept trying to say to me, like, Simon, I just have one question that I need you to answer for me, and it's a fairly broad question. And then your Siri went off like, what is the question you want me to answer? It's like, well, okay.
No, it wasn't that. It was because I kept saying, like, as soon as I got to the point where I said, I'm gonna say it for series. Okay, I'm good. As soon as I said that in my question, that's when the devil would pop up. So that's why we only got through the intro, because I would say that intro to the question, and then I would say, like, when we're thinking about this series, then that's when the devil would pop up.
You're totally right.
And I'm like, because it thinks I'm saying the devil's name.
That's hilarious.
And so that keeps happening. I hate it. This isn't the first time it's happened on the podcast. It's happened a couple times. It's just the worst it's been. Apple, your whole, like, you just say her name and she pops up thing is cool and all.
It was cool in 2013. It's not cool
Off.
anymore.
Yeah, exactly. It's not cool anymore. It's just annoying. I have the devil turned off on my phone. I have it turned off on my phone. I don't know how to turn it off on my laptop, which is so annoying that it's even a thing on my laptop.
Oh, it happens on your laptop? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's
the
interesting.
laptop's fault. Yeah,
okay.
It's awful.
I'm gonna jump in and give my shout out, because I am at 5% and I'm scared.
Okay, go for it. Go for it.
My shout out is because I said this to you in between the segments. I'm obviously sitting here in a very strange spot, I think, to most people who have walked by. Most people haven't cared about what I'm doing here because it's not that interesting. I'm just a dude sitting backwards on a lawn chair with a computer and a table on my lap. There's nothing that weird about that. I mean, just average resort activities, frankly. But there was one dude who walked by with his family, and, like, I had my mic muted which I had to do at a few points because it did get a little loud around me, despite it being 11 p.m. by the way, and I'm by a pool, which is very empty now, but it had a few people in it at one point actually. Anyway, he walked by with his family, and he had his, like, flashlight on his phone out, and he actually, like, pointed it at me. Like, he went out of his way to, like, point it directly at me and made, like, a grimace. Like, he was, like, very angry that I was there. And I wasn't talking at that point. I think you had been going on about a point for at least a minute or two, long enough for them to be, like, come around the corner. I hadn't talked at all. I might as well have just been sitting in here and working on my laptop. This dude points his flashlight at me and just, like, gives me a grimace. I was like, okay. Don't know what that was for, but thanks, I guess. Anyway, there's my shout out. I think Caleb might have frozen. I might be giving my shout out to a wall because I don't think he's still here, which is okay. That's all right. Anybody who made it this far, Caleb, you're back. I was about to end it anyway.
Oh, I'm back. Okay,
Caleb's
sick.
back. I'm at 4%, so my computer's about to go. I assume that's why you went, because my computer's about to explode. Like and subscribe. I'm going to stop this recording now. It's just to make sure it doesn't corrupt.
Wait.
Thanks for watching. Oh, wait. Say it quick.
Pedics better have a warm ass. And remember, Pedics better have a warm ass. See you next week.
Pedics better have a warm ass. That has to make it in, no matter what. Even if the computer dies.